Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine, talking all about a lawsuit that was filed just earlier this month. Nashville Community Bail Fund lawsuit, and it can have a big impact on really criminal justice and the way we write bails here in Nashville. We have with us Jonathan Farmer, attorney with Bone, McAllister, Norton, and he's neutral on this. So he's here just to give us information, advice, help us understand it. And then Mario Hambrick with Free at Last Bonding. He is on one side here, and we appreciate you being here. And we asked the other side, they couldn't be on. Let's go to some phone calls here. Let's go to Taylor. Hello, Taylor.
Good evening, Ben, and good evening to your guests. I was a court reporter for about 8 years, several years ago, so I was around criminal court every day for all those years and got to understand bonding quite a bit. It's a real mess on both sides of this, and the Community Bonding Fund is, I think, the same outfit that had pretty much of a scandal not too long ago with the former public defender and her boyfriend being involved in that, and I might be wrong about that, but I think that's the organization they were connected with some bad stuff. But this bonding thing is, and crime in general in this city, is going to become our top industry if it's not already, and what it costs to the taxpayers. But the old way, such as this one gentleman represents, is one way. The community thing is another way, but none of it is protecting the citizens like it should be. There are people, if you get to crime news, just dozens of young people and older people that are being charged, let out with no bond, and they already still waiting other charges that they were let out with no bond. And there are other schemes that other states have that's a whole lot better than either one of the two that's discussed here. And that's where the state or city itself acts as a bonding company. You pledge to the city $2,000 or whatever it is, and then you can, let's say you don't have a lawyer, you can consign that bond to go to the lawyer, and it doesn't go to the lawyer until the case is finished and you've showed up. If you don't show up, they keep the money. But you can get a lot more lawyers paid without the taxpayers paying that lawyer through those same bonds, and work much better than the system we've got now.
Okay, all right, I appreciate that, Taylor.
It needs a lot of work.
Needs a lot of work, and it sounds like you had some insight from your career. You had a point of view, and you saw what was going on. And I like what Taylor said. I don't know about the scandal. I'll ask about that in a minute. But he's saying the city acts as a bonding company. That's another way here. Is that right? I mean, is there? This is kind of a look at two ways of doing things, and there's even third and fourth ways, right? And what might some of those be?
I guess our version of a city acting as a bonding company, the closest thing we have to that is what's called pretrial release, and we touched on that a little bit earlier. And that's essentially where the sheriff's office, they have employees, they have officers whose job is to screen people to decide if they'd be good candidates to be released without having to pay any bond. So take my $2,000 example, for example. The magistrate says, okay, $2,000 to get out of jail, and that person goes to see the pretrial people, and they say, look, your bond's $2,000. You lived here your whole life, you don't get in trouble, we think you're a good bet to come back in court. We're not going to make you post a bond, we'll let you out under our pretrial release program. And then in effect, the sheriff's department becomes your, for lack of a better way to put it, your bonding company. That they become in charge of you, and to the extent that they're making sure you show up for court and those sorts of things. And the way they manage that is you've got to call in. They're supposed to call in weekly, and they have dedicated officers whose job is to kind of coordinate that with you.
And you're opposed to that.
Yes.
You have serious concerns with it, and we've talked about that on another show.
Yes.
I want to ask you, again, as someone who's objective, not on either side here, Is money a part of that? If I were arrested and they set my bond at $2,000, would they say, well, you don't have that, so you're more likely to go through this, or you do have it, so you're more likely to have to pay? I mean, is money part of the consideration, or is it just how long you've been in the community and your past record?
I don't think money is part of the consideration as to whether they give you pretrial release or not. I don't think that. I will say, though, that you know, the factors that judges are supposed to consider anyway when deciding whether or not or the amount of bail is your financial condition. You know, and I think really that's supposed to go both ways. I mean, for a person who's extraordinarily wealthy, and let's be honest, you know, the purpose of the bail is, you know, if you don't show up, you're going to lose this money, right? So for a person who's extraordinarily wealthy, a $5,000 bond may not mean anything at all. You know, the flip side of that, for a person who's extraordinarily poor, a $5,000 bond may as well be $1 million, right? I don't know that we're taking that into account in Davidson County when we're setting bonds. Maybe we are, but it doesn't look that way to me.
And this is a new thing we're doing, and I believe it was brought on because we faced a lawsuit that some of these very same firms from out of state they're suing cities, saying that we're keeping people in jail simply because they can't afford to post bond.
Yeah.
And this was our answer. Right? Do you think that's a
pretrial release was
right.
our answer? I think that's one answer. Yeah, I think the community bail fund's trying to fill a void there, certainly.
And so that's where we are now. Your concern with I called it pretrial diversion. That's wrong. It's pretrial release.
Exactly.
Your concern with pretrial release is what?
There's no accountability. I mean, like I said, people are just let go. The sheriff's department's not responsible, so if they doesn't appear in court, nobody's there to knock on the door or call little Skippy or the mama and say, hey, you know, little Skippy didn't go to court, and what are you going to do? You know, the judge is expecting him. You need to tell me where he's located or whatnot, whereas we're responsible. But I think Taylor, on his comment, he was exactly right. It was a scandal. I guess the former public defender or whatnot, Mr. Buford, I guess, it was a scandal that was basically aired out, and he's exactly right. He hit the nail on the head, and he's the key witness, and he's the star of this lawsuit, Mr. Buford. So his name is all in the lawsuit.
Now, what do you mean his name? Who is Mr.
I guess
Buford?
Mr.
What do you
Buford,
mean?
he's the guy that runs Community Bail Fund. He's the guy that, I guess, the operator. He's the guy that goes to the jail and releases so the 1,100 people that was released from jail was by him. I guess he's the bail bondsman, or acting as a bondsman for Community Bail Fund.
Now, this Reverend Davy Tucker also is quoted as saying the Nashville Community Bail Fund in the last 2.5-3 years has posted over $2 million in cash bonds in the criminal court clerk's office to free folks who would not have been freed otherwise. Of that number, 53% of the people that we've gotten out of jail, he said, the state either chose not to try them or they were not found guilty. So that's the other argument, that these people haven't even been found guilty, and they're just in there simply because they can't pay. So this comment here, what do you think about that?
I mean, I know Pastor Tucker. I mean, he's on the board. Of course, that's his group that he stands with, and I mean, that's his opinion. I would say that probably would not be accurate. I've been in court on many occasions where they've had tons of people that did not show up. And that was the reason several months ago that the judges made a decision about these fees and fines, because they were not being held accountable.
And so where do we stand now with this lawsuit? It was just filed, right?
Yeah, within the past week probably. And so that they've served Howard Gentry through his official capacity. That just means they've formally given him the lawsuit. And so then the federal rules of procedure will dictate that he has so much time to answer, to formally respond. I'm sure the Metro legal lawyers who will be representing him are in contact with the ACLU lawyers who represent the Community Bail Fund. I'm sure they're talking about what to do, how to do it, those sorts of things. But as far as what the next steps are, no one knows for sure except those two entities. But I think you could look for an answer and then some sort of a hearing about whether or not the court's going to keep Mr. Gentry from issuing bonds in this way before the trial of the matter.
They would likely want, I guess, an injunction, right? They would want the clerk's office, Davidson County, to stop withholding money out of that fund.
That's exactly what they want. Yeah.
And so they would go before a judge and ask for that.
Right. And so they want to do it before the trial. They want to say, look, we're likely to win. You know, we're suffering irreparable harm. and the irreparable harm is if you keep doing this, we're going to go out of business. So we can't wait for a trial, okay? And then because we're likely to win, we need you to go ahead and do it now. And then we'll have the trial and you know, kind of clean it all up, so to speak. In the alternative, though, I mean, if they're not successful for that, I mean, every indication I see is that they're going to go forward towards the trial and have a full hearing on the merits on this. And then a judge will decide whether or not this practice is constitutional. I mean, that's the reason it's in federal court, is that the Community Bail Fund is saying is that this is it's not just unfair, it's not just that it's, you know, you're going to hurt our business. You know, a lot of people have policies enacted that hurt their business. That sort of thing. What the Community Bail Fund saying is this is unconstitutional. You're violating the 8th and the 14th Amendment, and because of that, we need to go to federal court and talk about it.
Yeah, they do. The 8th and 14th Amendment. So they're saying it's, yeah, unconstitutional. That's pretty serious.
It is.
And, all right, I wonder, I don't know how deeply we can drill down into this, but your example of $2,000.
Right.
So they're going to take out court fees from that. So they put up the $2,000 for somebody who couldn't afford it.
Okay.
And that person, do we have a general amount? I mean, how much generally is taken out? How much generally is owed in court fees? Would they take $50? Is it $200? Is it $1,000? I mean, how much are they taking out each time?
And I'm not trying to dodge your question, but it's the classic. It depends. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're convicted of a DUI, for example, you can look at and you have a $2,000 bond. You can look at the clerk's office taking most of that money. If you're convicted of a 3rd or 4th offense DUI, $2,000 wouldn't cover it. They'd take it all.
Wow,
the
really?
flip side of that is, you know, if you're arrested for some sort of a petty theft and you show up on your first court appearance and get it resolved, I mean, it may be $150 and you get the rest back. So, you know, court costs are determined by a lot of things. You know, a lot of crimes have mandatory fees built in. Drug crimes have TBI testing fees built in. DUIs have all sorts of mandatory, you know, victim fund fees built in. That's why the court costs go higher. How many times you go to court matters. How many times they have to issue subpoenas matters. All that counts. Fines are included. Some crimes have, if you're convicted, have mandatory fines. For example, you know, I said a 2nd offense DUI. That's a $600 fine. So
that's significant.
Yeah, so
that's major.
Using
money.
my $2,000 analysis, you know, that's $6,000 right off the top.
Have they said how quickly their bail fund would run out of money? That if this continues, it goes dry, and how long? Do we know?
I don't know that. No, I don't know that.
Okay. All right. And now, all right. So what do you think? Obviously, you think they should play by the rules, and that's the way it goes.
I mean, you should play by the rules. I mean, there's 40 bonding companies down here. Every employee, you cannot have a record. You have to abide by the court rules. Like I said, every person, you have to write the bond. You have to pay taxes, you know, the $12 tax and then the tax on each bond. We have to have, my office manager has to be in court every day to make sure each person is there. And the judge will look at her and say, little Skippy didn't show up. You need to get in contact with him. So there's things that we as a regular bonding company have to do, and the rules and regulations that we have to abide by that this particular outfit and other outfits do not have to go by. So
using the same example of the $2,000 bond, I guess for a DUI, there are going to be some fees associated with that if it's covered by the Nashville Community Bail Fund. There'll be fees associated with it. They put up $2,000. Some of that will cover those fees. If you bail that person out, you put up $2,000, and then they show up. Do you get all $2,000 back, or how does that work?
Yes, we get once the case is concluded. So once the case is closed, some cases it may take 2 or 3 years. So if we put up that $2,000, then basically until that case is concluded. So whether they plead guilty or a jury trial or whatever, then at that point we're released off the bond. Then that money goes back into our account. But every bond that we make, every dollar we take in, we pay 36 cents per dollar. And then every bond that we write, we pay $12 per bond. So, and then you got to factor in all the costs, the office and everything. I wish that I could just go and write bonds and just, you know, be able to get the money but not have any expenses or costs. There's a lot of cost that comes with this business.
So they say it'll knock them out of business, that they'll eventually won't be able to do what they do. Is there some compromise that you think might work? That you would say, okay, I get what you're trying. I mean, could they do something on your end that would make things easier for you? I mean, is there some compromise here you think that would make people happy with this?
You know, which again, we don't have a problem with simple bonds, things of that nature, but you must play by the rules. That's my position. And I think the bonding industry, you must play by the rules. At one time, the director of this company was going over there, going inside the jail and doing jail interviews with people. Well, in my business, if I went into jail and I talked to a person, I had better be called, or otherwise that would be considered soliciting. So that's soliciting in the bond. If as a real bail bondsman, as soliciting, I can't say anything, approach anyone at the jail or in the capacity of the courthouse, or otherwise that'd be soliciting. One time they were just going in doing jail interviews inside the jail, asking people, okay, you want to make bond? And they were just coming out and getting 6 or 7 people out. But if I was to do that, then I would be arrested for soliciting.
But as I understand it, this is set up to help the poorest among us, right?
Exactly.
Are you worried that if it fails in the current environment we're in, they'll just do away with bond, altogether?
You know, there's a lot of talk, about doing away with cash bonds. I mean, people they've been saying it for years. You take a bunch of cities, kind of like Chicago and Kentucky. I mean, I've got 2 cousins that's retired from Chicago police and 2 cousins that are currently Chicago police officers. It's chaos. It's no responsibility, no basically people coming to justice. It's just buck wild. And so here in Tennessee, in most states, they have a system in place to control everything, to make sure that victim has his or her day in court. And you have people like me to make sure that the person comes to court. Whereas a lot of these places, it's just everything's wild.
Mm-hmm. So that would be Chicago, and that's an example where things have changed.
And Kentucky, and it's nobody there to make sure that this thing is walked out correctly.
All right, we're going to take a break. If you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. Be back right after this.